the theme today is really around data. You know, we talk so much about digital, and but digital and data work like a knife and fork together, and data is a little bit of the unsung hero. I think that's where all the magic happens. And the panel today are going to be three fantastic perspectives on data and how that's changing the consumer experience. We've got Justin Lim from Quashed, Amy Kavanagh from Pinnacle Life, and Chris Walsh from Money Hub.
I'm Justin. I'm the CEO of a company called Quashed. You may or may not be familiar with us, but the way I think about Quashed is really that Quashed tries to solve the problem of insurance paralysis. Quashed is really that digital insurance platform that you've always kind of wanted but never had, I guess, where this is one place where you can come in. It's the home of your insurance. You can store all your different insurance policies on there. And at a glance, you essentially get all these bits of data that's been picked out of all your different insurance policies. And it's presented to consumers in a way that makes it really, really easy for them to actually get a handle of their insurance situation. So you've probably got that screen in front of you where you're seeing essentially a Quashed dashboard of what your insurance could look like. So coming back to the point around data and what kind of Blair mentioned, data is really so fundamental to the digital experience that we've created at Quashed. And there's really two things I wanted to share around data. So the first of which is how we use data at Quashed to make informed decisions. And the second part is really around how we use that to build the ultimate customer experience around purchasing insurance. We haven't started from the standpoint of wanting to sell customers insurance. We've started from the standpoint or the pain point of customers don't actually have an understanding of the existing insurance policies and the existing insurance situation. So what we actually did was used our technology to extract all these different bits of data out of customers' existing policies. And through that, through the information that we're able to present to them, we're also able to create a really cool experience through a feature called Market Scan. And what Market Scan essentially does is that it looks at your existing policy. And from there, we actually then come back and show you a few other options that are available to you in the market for that policy. So as a consumer, I think one of the big gripes of insurance from a consumer's point of view is that you've always kind of got to re-enter your information, to get a quote or to purchase insurance. You're constantly going back to you multiple different insurers going, hey, I've got, this is my address, this is my rego, this is my date of birth, and all that sort of information is repeated over and over again. So for us, I guess the way we're using data to create the best insurance experience in our view is how do we minimize those inputs? How do we draw upon existing sources of data that we already know about the customers, and how do we use that to build this really, really seamless customer experience?
So I'm really fortunate to work at Pinnacle Life. We're a small online life insurer. We've been around in New Zealand for it's about 22 years. And the nature of our business has always been to do things online, to do things direct to consumer, and to try and do things differently. So we were the first in the world to do online underwriting, and now we're the first in New Zealand to bring digital advice to the market. So I'm going to talk to you about data in a couple of different ways that we use it. The first part is our digital advice offering, and this is how we proactively use data to support a positive customer experience. So we launched a digital advice offering in March this year. And so far, we're the only ones in New Zealand to have a full personalised financial advice for life insurance products in New Zealand. So the way that our digital advice offering works, and the biggest challenge that we had to face was breaking down a really complicated product in a way that helps customers understand their insurance and take them through the advice process where it's fully online. Customers are doing it all themselves, which means we don't have the advantage that your in-person advisors have in building rapport, engaging customers, taking them through the process, and potentially negotiating products and premiums at the end of it. So what we do with our advice, we really just look at inputs and how we use data to make it as simple as possible. So our ethos comes down to personalization, simplification, and credibility or trust. So the way that we use data in our advice process, we take a whole bunch of inputs and we are then able to tailor that advice. So we use actuarial risk assessments. So we take a whole bunch of claims data and a lot of mortality assessments, and we present some risks to customers. You know, what's the likelihood that someone of your age and gender could die before you're 65, could be diagnosed with cancer. We've got some stats that we use to just try and engage customers in why insurance is important, because life insurance is a really hard sell. People don't like thinking about why they need life insurance. Then the other thing we do is we use information from Statistics New Zealand. So we use census data and we use household expenditure surveys. So the reason why we use Statistics New Zealand data is it allows us to use assumptions, and then we can replace those assumptions with actual data if the customer wants to put the time and energy in that. So if a customer wants to tell us how they spend their money, or the structure of their debt, or as much information as the customer wants to give us, they can, and we just replace those assumptions with their data. But we know that there are customers out there that don't want to give that level of information, so we use assumptions, which means that the effort required from customers is fully driven by them. And then that's where that last piece comes in, is about the customer data and the customer choice. So we do have to use some customer data. That's just the reality of advice. But it's really up to the customer what they want to give to us. And then we use their choices. So we present goals and options. And it's almost like our advice is this big funnel that gets narrowed down based of what customers want to do. So that's proactively how we use data to drive our advice. Hotjar recordings are really valuable because it helps us understand how customers are using our website. It challenges our assumptions on how we think they will use it, or it validates decisions that we've made about which way they're going. And it also helps us identify barriers or difficulties. So what usually sits beside or behind the Hotjar analysis is our Google Analytics. So we might identify certain areas of our website where customers stop the process. And so we start to watch recordings to figure out what they do up until that point. So that's quite a fun way to use it. It's quite time intensive though, but it is really valuable. The other one we do a lot of is conversion rate optimization with our A/B testing. So we will quite often actually have two versions of our website running at a time, and the differences might be quite minute. I've given you an example here. So this is emotional versus transactional language that we might use. It's as simple as the button saying begin or the button saying get started, and then we track which one of those is more likely to lead to conversions. Making things like apply for life insurance versus get a quote now. It's amazing how different some of those things can be. It's also quite good at settling arguments in the office by running things through A/B testing. But that's just another way that we can see using data, making changes to improve that customer experience. Underlying all of that is Google Analytics. There's a wealth of information that's available on how people use our website and what Google tracking we can put in place. Again, that helps us identify those drop-off points, something that Justin mentioned as well. If you can know where customers stop using your website, you start to identify opportunities to make that customer experience better.
So just as a background, we're a price comparison site. We've been going about 3 years. So not a financial advisor. We get about 10 to 15,000 searches per day. That largely comes from things like managed funds, KiwiSaver, whole bunch of different things. Like insurance is certainly quite high up there, but we're growing every day, which is great. So for me, I love insurance. Sadly, it's not as popular on the site as it should be, but that's a work in progress. And so we're just growing that. And we started off doing a very simple car insurance comparison, just to kind of meet the market needs of sort of deciphering and make it more accessible. Now we've grown everything into really fine tuning whole bunch of things like landlord insurance, pet insurance. We've recently done lots of life insurance products. So every day, thousands of people search for insurance products online. We estimate from what we see, probably they're comparing 2 to 3 policies. So they've got their existing policy, then they've got what policy they think they might look at or switch to, and then they've got one for kind of a yardstick. And we see this all day long. So what we want people to do is to have like much faster quoting experience. So when we first started Money Hub, it was so laborious to try and get quotes out of established providers. There were so many questions. It took forever. The repricing that we do every 3 to 6 months. Oh, it was so painful. Now, because I think we've exposed a whole bunch of different sort of spreads, with the insurers, things have become way quicker, and also technology has improved. So I noticed that Tower like dropped a few questions for car, but we've seen that like these things along the market. So previously we would, fill out a whole bunch of questions and then get like basically some message saying, oh, actually you're outside of our risk profile, you need to call a number. Now we're getting quotes. So that's really, really good. So we see data as really critical. Like the more data that can be used to drive the quoting, that can be kind of like minimize the number of like irrelevant questions, because they all take time. I mean, one insurer that I really like, they've moved from 20 different sort of input screens to basically now one Google form. And in a very kind of niche way, I think you can get a quote in about 2 minutes. So that makes things very quickly. So yeah, we just see like sort of less questions, more data, we're going to get like sort of fairer prices. So for car insurance, we've noticed that for some insurance, finance cars, they tend to be kind of more risky. So they are often sort of more stolen or higher accidents. So that's why they have sort of higher premiums. Not majorly, not double, but slightly. So that's one factor. And then for home insurance, back in the day, everything was kind of flat. I say this not from an insurance background, just kind of like generally. Now there's so much data out there on sort of like risk of floods, risk of everything, that pooled risk has moved to very specific risk. So that's fair, really, because you can have a house on a hill with a nice big view, and if it has no flood risk, why are you subsidizing flood risk people? What we see is that the more data there is that can be used to get like accurate quotes, it's going to basically speed up the sales process. It's going to make everything much more transparent, so people can actually get like relevant quotes, not just quotes to kind of like tease them in. What I've seen overseas certainly is you get these introductory prices, but then next year you renew it and it just shoots up so much. So now it would be good, and I have seen this, that risk-based pricing kind of brings it in fairly. The underwriter or the insurance company isn't like sort of losing money on it. And so when it does come to renewal, you don't get these massive spikes. And yeah, because what we see with all of our like thousands of people every day, people are very happy to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes comparing. I mean, we see them do that all day long. So there's no point to kind of honey trap them in with lower prices, hoping they'll kind of pay a lazy tax. What we're seeing is people switch out. I mean, we're not a big churn business. We don't like that at all. We like people to choose right, which is why we're kind of last to the clicks, first to the information. But certainly the honeymoon period is something which has sort of caught out insurance companies in the past. So yeah, long-term loyalty can come from great data. And that's the summary.
Just do a quick fire Q&A and fire up the questions, and we'll see if we can get through as many questions as possible. Starting with maybe Justin, there's a question there. How do you know you've got like for like, and the comparison doesn't just degenerate itself to a price war?
How do we make it easy for consumers to look at, without picking up each individual policies, but actually fishing out kind of the key benefits that are most common across these policies, and just surfacing that up so that customers can, at a glance, make a decision there as to say, hey, maybe I want to investigate this a bit more, or completely this policy may not cover something at all.
The answer there is lots more sharing of data. So at the moment, no one shares it. And so you can't integrate a whole bunch of stuff because no one's going to let you do that. So the big players kind of sit by themselves, and that's why it's not like the UK. It's not even like Australia.
We're seeing a lot of customers using it, and we're getting really positive feedback from the customers that have gone through it. We are seeing it turning into sales, I'll be honest, and say that it's getting some conversion there. But what is really interesting, we're using data to track what customers are being advised, what customer they're going and what advice they're being given, and then what policies they go and buy. And that's pretty consistent. So that means that the advice that we're giving is hitting home, and that's resonating, which is great.
I actually think it's a great thing. And for us, we've always kind of prioritized sort of transparency around the information that we hold from consumers. And also, I think consumers understand, I think there was a point made there by Amy around, when consumers give you the information, they expect something valuable back in return. And
we've had online underwriting since 2007, and we've really stripped that down to what's the minimum amount of information we need to be able to underwrite this policy. And we're still, we've actually recently done an international market scan, so we're still leading the way with our 20 medical questions to do that. So we try and make that as simple as possible, and we've identified where the opportunities to fall out and say, actually, there's no point you answering any more questions. Let's just go talk to your doctor or something. So there's that element there. And this is where I think is the biggest opportunity for innovation in the data space for life and potentially health insurers, is in that underwriting space. There's a huge amount of data out there about mortality risks, morbidity risks, people's health status, and no one's really tapped into that from an underwriting perspective.
I think, digital adoption is definitely, spread across all ages these days, but I would say, predominantly our market is still, gearing towards the millennials.
So we also have a really good spread of age and genders. You can't make assumptions about people. So we've definitely got the ones at the younger end and at the older end using our digital advice platform.
Insurance, it's probably in the kind of 20 to 55 year age range. So we do go young, and also we go into sort of older life as well.